All right, let's just jump right in. Today, we're going to take a look at one of the most influential minds in all of human history, but probably not in the way you're used to. We're not talking theology. We're talking psychiatry and psychology. This is an analysis of Jesus Christ as seen through the eyes of Dr. Augusto Cury.
You see, Dr. Cury, who's a psychiatrist and a researcher, started this whole investigation from a really stark, clinical point of view. He was an atheist at the time, and he kicked it all off with a question that gets right to the heart of it all. If you strip away all the faith, all the religion, and just look at the documented claims and behaviors, are you looking at the greatest psychotic in history, or are you looking at the greatest truth? Now, the person doing the analysis here is what makes this so fascinating. Dr. Augusto Cury is not a priest or pastor. He's a medical doctor, a scientist who studies how our thoughts are formed. And here's the crucial part. When he started this whole project, he was a self-described skeptic and atheist. He basically thought that God was just an idea the brain cooked up to deal with the fear of death. So his approach was purely 100% clinical.
So Cury picked up the four Gospels and decided to read them not as sacred texts, but as biographical documents, almost like patient files. And, from a purely psychiatric standpoint, a man making the kinds of claims Jesus made, well, that would set off some serious red flags in any clinic. This wasn't about being disrespectful. For him, it was a necessary diagnostic starting point.
Okay, so let's actually build that case for delusion, just like Dr. Cury did. He zoned in on the words Jesus actually said about himself. And honestly, if you heard a patient saying these things in a therapy session today, a diagnosis of psychosis would be right at the top of your list. Let's look at a few examples.
Right out of the gate, this is a huge break from reality. You got to remember, Abraham lived 2,000 years before Jesus. So for a man in his early 30s to claim he existed not just before his parents, but by millennia, that is clinically off the charts. He's basically saying he exists outside of time itself.
The implication of this one, scientifically, is just staggering. Cury points out that he's essentially saying his words are immune to the laws of physics. Think about the law of entropy, the basic rule that everything in the universe winds down, from stars burning out to your desk eventually turning to dust. He was placing his words above that fundamental universal law.
And here it is, maybe the most grandiose claim of them all, the power to literally conquer death. From a clinical perspective, claiming you hold the keys to eternal life, that you have authority over the one thing that is absolutely irreversible, well, the grandiosity of that statement is almost unimaginable.
So you can see how all these statements fit perfectly into the clinical definition of a delusion of grandeur. Cury saw this clear pattern. The words, when you just isolated the words, pointed directly to a profound psychotic disorder. The case for psychosis, based on claims alone, was really, really strong. But then, Cury hit a massive wall.
He found this stunning contradiction, because while the words of Jesus suggested a complete break from reality, his behavior showed a level of emotional stability, of clear thinking, and of mental mastery that wasn't just healthy, it was unlike anything Cury had ever studied. It completely contradicted all the expected symptoms. And this is the paradox at the core of it all. Someone experiencing delusions that big should be emotionally unstable. They should be incoherent when you put them under pressure. They should have a really low tolerance for frustration. But in every single high-stakes situation, Jesus showed the exact opposite. Unshakable calm, crystal clear reasoning, and this incredible ability to manage not only his own emotions, but the emotions of everyone around him. The symptoms and the behavior just did not match up.
Let's look at a case study Cury uses, the story of the woman caught in adultery. His accusers lay a perfect trap. If he says stone her, he breaks Roman law and goes against his own message. If he says don't stone her, he's violating ancient Mosaic law. There's no right answer. But watch what he does. First, proactive silence. He doesn't take the bait. He just kneels and writes on the ground, completely diffusing the tension. Second, he completely reframes the debate. He changes the basis of judgment from her sin to their sin. Brilliant. Third, after everyone leaves, he humanizes her. He doesn't call her adulterer, he calls her woman, giving her back her dignity. And finally, he empowers her. He doesn't say, now you owe me, or you have to follow me. He just tells her to go and be the author of her own new story. I mean, come on. That is not the behavior of a disorganized mind.
So Cury's analysis got even bigger. It wasn't just about Jesus' own incredible psychological stability. It was his almost unbelievable talent for making other people brilliant. Cury, whose whole career is about studying how great thinkers are formed, was absolutely floored by the team Jesus chose to go out and change the world.
I mean, this was not an A-team, not even close.
You had Peter, who was impulsive and riddled with anxiety. You had John and James, who were so ambitious they got their mom to ask for seats at the head of the table. Thomas was basically a paranoid conspiracy theorist. Matthew was seen as a corrupt collaborator. Cury even points out that Judas, on paper, was probably the most qualified of the bunch, but he had zero ability to manage his own emotions. This was a team of deeply flawed, emotionally volatile people.
And this was the key for Cury. A person in a psychotic state can't even organize their own mind, let alone systematically build up the minds of others. Yet Jesus took this group of deeply flawed individuals, this crude clay, as Cury puts it, and molded them into thinkers and leaders whose ideas literally reshaped civilization. That ability, right there, is the sign of what Cury calls a master of masters.
So what's amazing is how this analysis of a perfectly managed mind from 2,000 years ago leads Cury to a shocking diagnosis of, well, us, right here, right now. He uses these same principles to identify the core sickness of the 21st century, arguing that our society has become collectively mentally ill. He came up with a term for it, accelerated thought syndrome. It's not an official diagnosis you'll find in a medical textbook, but it describes a condition he sees everywhere. It's a state of constant mental agitation, where the flood of information, of worries, of digital pings makes our minds race uncontrollably. It's basically the brain stuck in overdrive, and it leads to total emotional and physical burnout.
And this is where his diagnosis gets really personal. Just ask yourself, do any of these sound familiar? Waking up and you already feel tired? Finding it impossible to concentrate? Forgetting little things all the time? Getting irritated super easily? Or how about this one? Suffering in anticipation, constantly worrying about what might happen. According to Cury, these aren't just stress. They're symptoms of a mind that has lost the ability to manage itself.
And the stakes for getting this right are incredibly high. Cury cites research that predicts 1 out of every 2 people on Earth will develop a psychiatric disorder in their lifetime. 1 in 2. This isn't some fringe issue, it's a massive public health crisis. That skill of emotional self-management that Jesus modeled, it's never been more critical than it is right now.
So, let's bring it all back home. After looking at the grandiose claims on one side and the impossibly stable behavior on the other, how did Dr. Cury, the scientist, the skeptic, how did he finally answer his own question? Psychotic or the greatest truth?
Well, here's the final breakdown. The claims pointed straight to psychosis, but the behavior completely, totally contradicted it. No patient in the entire history of psychiatry had ever shown up with this bizarre combination. A person with such deep delusions should be a mess, disorganized, volatile. Yet Jesus was the most coherent, emotionally balanced human Cury had ever analyzed. His conclusion? This individual didn't fit into any psychological or psychiatric box. This was a phenomenon that, in his words, does not fit in the human imagination.
This whole journey of analysis completely changed Dr. Cury. The psychiatrist who set out to clinically debunk a historical myth ended up concluding that he was studying a mind that operated beyond any human framework he knew. And that realization is what led him to abandon his atheism. This quote from him just sums it all up. Never has someone so great made himself so small to make the small great.
And that brings us to the final thought. Dr. Cury's entire analysis, both of this ancient mind and our modern one, really boils down to this one urgent question for all of us. We manage our money. We manage our careers. We manage our schedules down to the minute. But that most important territory, the one that actually determines our peace and our quality of life, is often left totally unguarded. So the question is, who is managing your mind?